And we're back. Spicy Sports with Sam on Spreaker, Episode 4, special podcast, NFL Draft Edition.
Yes.
8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. I don't know how you're up if you're not a Seattle fan, LA Rams fan, or a New England Patriots fan at this point. It's pretty insane that we're at this point in the draft. And I said, you know what? Forget the last 3-4 picks, because honestly it's West Coast teams. If you're up at this point, you're either a Seattle fan, you're a LA Rams fan, or you're a ridiculous New England fan that's probably going to get back to the Super Bowl next year. So we're going to cover on today's podcast a live reaction to what these picks have been. And of course, with me, making his Spicy Sports with Sam on Spreaker debut, we got Riley Kirkpatrick. Riley, welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Awesome. So, it's been pretty insane the last 3 hours. I mean, we were discussing it leading up to the draft. You know, who we're going to pick, what's going to happen. And honestly, a lot of the picks were fairly predictable. I think it's a fairly defensive draft.
Yeah,
there's a lot of players that were going to be picked in the top half of the draft, mainly based off their potential from the defensive perspective. And now we're at the point where we're in the back half of the draft where in the first round, you're looking to get more value in who has dropped at this point than who has not at this point. Because I think most of the picks that were going to be made in the first 28 picks, Seattle's on the clock right now with 4 to 39 as we speak right now left in the first round of their first of 2 consecutive picks. Will DK Metcalf be taken off the board? That's the first pick. A lot of picks here. But, Riley, obviously as a Packers fan, you guys had 2 first-round picks in the first round, opening round of this draft. There were a lot of places you could go. Did you feel satisfied with where the Packers selected and what they selected in the first round, considering they had to trade up for their second of their 2 first-round picks?
Honestly, I feel a little bit on edge still. Rashawn Gary is a great athlete. He's a great player, but as far as reports have shown, that hasn't shown up on the field, and he's kind of a question mark right now. And as a person to take at number 12, that seems a little bit scary for me. As far as our trade up for number 21 and getting Darnell Savage, I think that was something that we really needed to address as far as the safety position. We have Tramon Williams, who's kind of a corner safety hybrid. He doesn't know really where he's going to fit in. But I think when we get Darnell Savage in the safety position, that'll be a really solid player who'll be able to come in and get some starts his first year and allow Tramon to come down into the cornerback position where he really feels more comfortable and solidify our secondary and kind of round it out after getting Amos in free agency earlier.
Yeah, no, I think the Packers, overall did very well. I mean, for what they were going to get. Rashawn Gary, I think, is a great pick. 6'4", 277 pounds, a defensive end who can, if willing, can play either in the 4-3 or 3-4 defense for the Packers. Was the number 1 overall rated player coming out of his class in high school and now coming out of college and being the 12th overall pick in this draft. It clearly seems that Gary was a great pick for a defense that had a lot of problems last year for the Packers. Obviously, there's a lot of needs that can be addressed or would like to be addressed, I would say, by this new Packers administration as they head into Aaron Rodgers' final couple of years of his career, which is important. Obviously, you want to surround him with a win-now mentality, saying, hey, look, we're not looking to rebuild, we're looking to reload. And Rashawn Gary is a player that can immediately make an impact, which is great. And they made a savage pick, and yes, pun intended here, Darnell Savage Jr., the safety out of Maryland. He's undersized safety, but he has great speed. He can get to the ball. And as you mentioned, Tramon Williams is a huge pick that I think will be beneficial for the Packers as they look to bolster their secondary. They're going to be a great pick that, in the long term, is going to be beneficial for them. I mean, they predicate on defense, and particularly in the back half of their secondary, whether it be their cornerbacks or their safeties. That's where they're able to make a difference, and that's how they're able to get to big games in the playoffs. That's where their bread and butter has been the last couple of seasons when everyone is healthy. Now, again, keyword, everyone healthy. Overall, I think for the Packers, they did great in the first round, even trading up, again, a couple picks, and it's not a lot here what they had to give up in order to get up to got 2 picks, which isn't a lot. But let's go back.
30, and we gave up 2 4th rounds.
That's
for that 21st.
Yeah, and exactly for that's absolutely for a safety that could be a franchise-changing safety, or at least a franchise safety that for the next 5-10 years will be quality. I think that's overall pretty good.
As you, as a Maryland man, Sam, I'd be interested in hearing your evaluation of Savage during his years in college at Maryland.
Look, Maryland's has been as a football team, has been the bottom feeders of the Big Ten. They've been the team that you circle Maryland on their schedule if you're looking for a W. But in the last couple of years, this team has been very competitive. And in part, especially on the defensive end, has had to do with what Savage has been able to do. 5'11", 188 pounds. He's one of the bigger safeties in the conference, and has been able to be as productive as a safety as he has been. What he will bring to this team in the Packers organization is professionalism, as was through a trying season at Maryland, following the death of one of their star players. Having to rally around that and be competitive in tough environments, whether it be at Ohio State, whether it be against Penn State. All throughout the conference, I think Savage has had to have been a leader, and that aspect will carry to the NFL. Obviously, it won't reflect right away with veterans in that particular position taking precedence over that, but I think overall he will gain the respect of his teammates and say, hey, look, this guy is a baller, and this is a guy that long-term, in the first round, at safety, is an absolute stud at that particular position. But let's talk about the first overall pick that I think many of us expected, right? We expected Kyler Murray to be picked number 1 overall by the Cardinals. And it took, as Riley and you and I saw, it was about a minute and a half left in the first round, and we're like, are they really not going to pick Kyler Murray after all the discussion that new head coach Cliff Kingsbury said about Kyler Murray in interviews after they decided to tank their staff and say, hey, look, we're going in a completely new direction here, and saying, hey, this is the guy. And for one, this is a high-risk maneuver, as we all thought. Many have said that Kyler Murray comparison initially is to Russell Wilson, which I think is a fair comparison, being the about 5'10", 207 pounds out of Oklahoma, being the guy who, against Oklahoma, didn't play well in that first half of the semifinals of the national championship, but in the second half he balled out, and that's where his stock completely rose. And overall, as again, the pieces started to come into fruition, where look, Cliff Kingsbury started to get hired. This new staff was like, hey, look, let's build around a spread offense, and Kyler Murray is going to be the guy. A lot of questions. I mean, look, Kyler Murray is a high-risk, high-reward pick at number 1. You're going to have him start at some point this season. The Cardinals fans will want him to start. Riley, what are your thoughts on Kyler Murray going number 1 overall?
I mean, I think like you were talking about originally, when we saw how long it took for them to come in with this pick, that Murray was someone that the Cardinals were, not necessarily, as we say, running that card in for. They weren't, as soon as that draft board opened, walking up to this podium and saying, Kyler Murray is our guy. I feel phones were ringing around. They were looking for other people to maybe trade down. They weren't getting the value that they expected from Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray does fit into the scheme of this offense. And when they're getting that player, if they feel like the value is there for him, I think they had to take him. If they did the due diligence looking around the league, and if he's not taken there, I don't know where their answer is at quarterback.
Right. I mean,
so I think first round, they got that first pick, they used it, and they're pinning that guy to their franchise. They're ready to ride him all the way.
100%. And I think that's the idea, right? If you're picking number one overall and you're picking a quarterback, which, by the way, has been the number one overall pick since 2007. 2006 was the last time a non-quarterback was picked in the first round. You expect this guy to start within the first season. Now, obviously, we've seen mixed results throughout, dating back to when in 2007 Jamarcus Russell was selected number one overall by the Oakland Raiders, which we'll talk about in a second. Throughout, I would say in the last 12 picks, until we can evaluate further, Andrew Luck has been the best example of a number one overall pick panning out. And even then, he still has a long ways to go, considering he just came back from a serious injury and was named Comeback Player of the Year, did really great in the playoffs. The quarterback position is so difficult to predict, but when you're investing the number one overall pick in the draft, a franchise-changing quarterback, you have to go with a guy that will fit the scheme that you're looking to do, and you're looking to make the coach successful from day one. And this is the perfect combination. Kyler Murray, Cliff Kingsbury. This is what you're going to watch. You're going to watch this from day one. I think Kyler Murray's probably going to start out of camp. We'll see what happens with Josh Rosen, whether he becomes trade bait as training camp goes on. Or whether we see Kyler Murray struggle and they say, we're going to play Josh Allen week 1, and then we'll see until Josh Rosen's. I keep saying Josh Allen because I'm a Buffalo Bills fan right here. How Josh Rosen does the first couple weeks of the season, and then if he does not do great, then we're going to have to rely on, can Kyler Murray make the plays that he made in Oklahoma last season?
I think that competition right away in camp is important for a rookie player. You got two guys who were taken fairly high in the draft competing for whether it's the starting position in Arizona or a position where they're being traded away for it. Both these guys are going to play at a very high level no matter where they're going to end up right away into camp. And the competition there at the quarterback position is always a good thing. Competition at any position is a good thing. And the Cardinals have created this. They've set out to establish a new order in their offense. And it's going to start with Kyler Murray.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's going to start with Murray, and then as we go down through the picks here, Nick Bosa, number 2 to Ohio State, that makes sense. Quinnen Williams for the Jets, that's also going to make sense. Number 4, Clelin Ferrell, by the way. Cleland. There you go. Good pronunciation. That's actually the right pronunciation. Excuse me. Cleland Ferrell.
We were expecting to have to pronounce this early.
At number 4 to the Raiders. 6'4", 264-pound defensive end.
Not at all a bad player.
Not a bad player. He was expected to go in the back half of the first round, but number 4